summer holidays and they come back refreshed and renewed. I'm going to go straight into apologies for absence. Jana?
So we have apologies for absent from Councillor Anthony Tucker and
Right, I'm told Councillor Gethin is going to try and join us on Teams, and I think Councillor Clements is as well. If he's not here already.
You was.
Anyway, so moving on to declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare anything that isn't already declared in the register of interests? In which case, I will move on to item 3 very briefly because I've got no remarks as chair. Item 4 minutes of the 8th of July. First of all, in terms of factual accuracy, does anyone have anything they wish to say which they believe is factually incorrect? That's always good. In terms of matters arising or in terms of anything from the action tracker, does anyone want to say anything? Councillor Auden.
Thank you. On page 10, obviously concerns were raised about St George's development in Wolverhampton and the delays there. We discussed that, and Megan will be picking up having officers coming to next May. Hopefully next May, either the one after that, if the officers can't come to next one, to go into that in more detail. And Carol, I'll make sure you've got an invitation to that because obviously I know you raised it last meeting.
Thank you very much.
Okay, in terms of
Chair,
yes,
I have a comment. I do apologise. I'm hastily.
microphone, please.
Page 6, minute 96.
It's the advantage of the 21st century.
Really my computer to go more swiftly.
I think you raised concerns about the 80% variance in the sustainable travel budget due to inflation and project delays.
I'm on page 4. Right. Yes, I did. And I questioned the efficiency project management process and that in the time, the process that has to be followed extends the length of time it takes to get a project underway. And that has budgeting implications just of itself. On further exploration, one of the key things that's holding things up was the length of time that it took to create a bespoke funding agreement for each individual project. And I know that Anne has something to share with regard to that, which I think will be of interest for TDOCs.
Yes, if you could add.
So we've been talking to our colleagues across all the authorities who are suffering, I think, from some time delays in terms of the whole of the single assurance process. So the single assurance framework, that's the end-to-end process. We've been working with colleagues in the Black Country team who are helpfully putting together throughout the sort of whole submitting things for approvals, where we see some of the time lags. I don't think it's just the funding agreements. That is one element to it. So it's the end-to-end process, and we are planning with Sandeep's help as well to sort of run a bit of a workshop with colleagues here at WMCA who are responsible for the whole of the appraisal process to see where we can look at where issues are occurring and how we can streamline some of those processes as well. But we actually need some of the evidence to demonstrate where some of these issues are so that we can work through the process flow of those approvals as well. So that's where we're up to, and I hope by the next TDOS that we have had that session and we'll be able to report back any improvements. I'm sort of in the middle of it because it's the what we call the enabling services team across the combined authority that are responsible for this. So Louise, who's sitting behind you on the screen there, and that team are working on how we pull that together, and with the evidence that comes back from the Black Country team, plus the other authorities as well, I hasten to add that we'll be able to see where we can streamline things in place.
Thank you very much. I've also flagged up to Councillor Hyatt that Birmingham City Council took a scrutiny review to the July meeting of our City Council on active travel and the single assurance framework and actually getting schemes completed was a key recommendation as part of that scrutiny review. And I think Councillor Hyde is going to look at that scrutiny report with interest. Two issues from me. In terms of the MEG review, which is on the action tracker number 10, I will take this during the actual agenda report under item 8. And in terms of action tracker number 11, work programme, I believe all members have been provided with a briefing note regarding a potential scrutiny review for revenue funding. That very keen to do it, but now is not the right time to do it because there's so many questions that still need answering in terms of future finances, not least the new government spending review, and also a briefing that has been circulated regarding Veterans Bus Pass and its implications. I don't know if any members wanted to say anything on either of those issues. Councillor Nicholas.
Just really on the Veterans Bus Pass, acknowledging the difficulties of finding £5 million in terms of funding. Nevertheless, it should come to TDOS for decision. Is that the proposal?
Well, my understanding is that TDOS is not a decision-making body, so it can't come to us for a decision. How would be best to progress it, Anne?
So what you're asking for is a new local policy to be introduced into the local policies that we fund. So it would have to be considered alongside all of the existing local policies and how it would be funded within the existing budget. And that might mean removing some other local policy in order to fund it as well. So it's something that is probably subject to a review of all local policies. So that's things like children's half price fares, top up for rail and metro for our older travel pass holders as well under the ENCS scheme, as well as contracted socially necessary bus services where there's no market for it. So absorbing 5 million into a budget which is already in the MTFP forecasting quite a big shortfall. There's going to be some difficult decisions to be made about how we fund that alongside the existing policies as well. But it would be a policy review is the only way that we could do that.
So essentially it's a board decision anyway in terms of that policy review. So it would have to go to the board. I think if we sent correspondence saying we would like this to be considered alongside all the other policy decisions, and then leave it up to the mayor and the board to actually determine because they are the decision-making body job. Would you be happy with that?
Yeah, but that implies that we're content with it going forward. We haven't had a debate. The issue was raised effectively in A or B. If you're now saying that that is a proposal coming from TDOS, well, that takes us out of the equation and recognising the difficulties, and where the decisions are to be made, I'm content with the letter.
Okay. Councillor Alden.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm content with either a letter or a further report back to the committee either way. And I do think it warrants further investigation. If we're doing it, or whichever way we do it, I think there are two things that ought to be picked up as well as part of this. Clearly, those veterans who are qualified for other parties actually wouldn't be paid for as part of this. And I think the figures were worked out on the assumption that all veterans would be paid. So it would be a lower cost than that because some are already covered for other budgets. And therefore, what we're really talking about is working age veterans. And therefore, I think there's an opportunity to investigate further as to whether actually any of the budgets that exist around careers and training, etc., is actually usable, because the argument would be this is helping veterans get back into employment by giving them that transport pass. Thank you.
Councillor Clements.
Yeah, it was a more general point about our role as this scrutiny committee. I think we should be making policy recommendations, and hopefully if we're doing some scrutiny inquiries, that's where they would flow from. But like Councillor McNicholas, I would expect them to have them to be discussed fully in the committee before they go forward to the board. But I generally am hoping this year that we get more chance to put forward such policy recommendations, but also to do some pre-decision scrutiny, i.e. to have influence on reports and decisions before they actually get taken at the board. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Clements. I think that using the briefing note as the basis, that we put together a letter, but that we discuss it at the next TDOS meeting as a separate item agenda before sending it on to the board for consideration. But of course, this doesn't stop members raising that if they wish to on Monday, the 21st of October, where we have the joint ONS committee's mayoral Q&A policy anyway. So are we content with that? John.
Chair, can I just come back briefly? I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I do take very seriously what Anne's just told us about the financial constraints, and while this would be a really worthwhile thing to do, and treating veterans with the respect that they rightly deserve, we've got to think about the detrimental impact on the other discretionary concessionary schemes that we're running, that we're at the moment struggling to fund. So I think it deserves a serious discussion in a plenary session. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Clements. Councillor Nicholas.
These are all very helpful proposals to take us forward. I'm particularly mindful of the comments Councillor Oldham made, because yes, the reality is we are looking at those working age veterans. Others can be accommodated in different ways. So I'd like that clarification to be understood, and perhaps the briefing note to reflect such, in order for us to actually look at a real figure as to what we're actually seeking to achieve. Then we can look at Councillor Clements' comments in terms of what impact that would have on other discretionary services. Thank you very much.
No, I'm sure that briefing note will include all that information, won't it, Anne?
Yeah, but I'd also like to add an action for us to discuss with the skills team here at the Combined Authority to review whether there are any other funds that could be utilised to support this particular initiative.
Yes.
So if that could just be recorded as an action as well, and then we'll come back with that item.
Okay. Excellent. Any other matters arising from the action tracker or minutes? I'm not seeing any indications, so I'm going to move on to the Deeper Evolution Deal Transport Implementation Plan. And David and Adam, who's going to take it?
Morning, everyone. So my name is Adam Harrison. I work in CFBM's Policy and Strategy team. So this is the report that details a 6-month progress on delivering the transport elements of the very hard to say deeper devolution deal that we signed back in with government in 2023. The report also notes clearly we've had a general election since the last update, so it also sets out the new government's ambitions for devolution, and also how they've reconfirmed the commitment towards a single settlement funding approach with the Combined Authority, which was another key component of the Devo deal. It sets out in detail in the options section around the devolution agenda that's going to come forward. So there'll be a new English devolution framework and a devolution bill. This is also supported by 3 specific transport bills. So if anyone has been seeing the press this morning, a Better Buses bill will be introduced into Parliament at some point today. So the Combined Authority is working closely with other national bodies and some of our MCA, Mayoral Combined Authority colleagues across the country, and Urban Transport Group about how we influence government's detail on this future devolution and legislative agenda. It's worth noting that in respect of some of the comments around future budgets, the CA will be making a autumn budget representation, so the budget on the 30th of October this year, to make sure that we get sustained funding to kind of improve and maintain our public transport network. But overall, the report sets out key opportunities for the combined authorities to secure further devolution powers and resources to make sure that we can deliver an integrated transport system for the residents and communities across the West Midlands, but also an opportunity to deliver on some of the stalled areas within that kind of previous deal that we had got with government back in 2023. The kind of recommendation report is that we want to have the opportunity to engage with the relevant MEG on this agenda, so we ensure that members get that input and understanding around some of our emerging priorities within the kind of devolution framework, but also how the local transport pillar is being developed within a future single settlement. So that's a bit of a brief synopsis of the reports, but David and I are happy to take any detailed questions.
Councillor Hyde.
It's 4.10 on it, and it says it is now anticipated but to be formally confirmed that the first single settlement next financial year will provide a 1-year funding profile to be followed by a multi-year profile in due course. Have you had any indication, will that 1-year funding profile be as much as you expected? Will it be less? And will it be something that you hope will be improved on in the following years to come? I know I'm asking you to use a crystal ball really, but the thing about having a single settlement that we were told was that, you know, it could be several years, you know, we'll be like a government department, we won't have it just for 1 year, you know, and we have to work out what to do and hope for the best for the next year. But now, you know, it's likely that it's going to be more of the same, certainly for 1 year. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes. Yeah, so single settlement, we will have some funds that are committed and that will run through. So if you think about CRUS, that's the terrible acronym, our City Region Sustainable Transport Fund, that capital settlement runs to 26, 27 anyway. But I think the part of the work that we're doing for 25, 26 is ensuring that we maintain the money that we've been getting. And there was some commitment around, it's not called Network North, but there was that money that was committed in the previous autumn statement. So that our position is we make sure that we secure those funds and that's carried through into that 1-year settlement. There will be a process for we don't know if it's a 3-year spending review from 26, 27, or it'll be a 4-year. So we have some time to start that process and lobbying around that. So combined authority colleagues are actively starting those discussions with Treasury around making sure that we maintain and improve spending going forward. I think it's fair to say if a new government wants to improve buses and rail, that they need to maintain or increase the level of spending. So there's a work going on with CA colleagues at official and I hope at political level around that. And I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I think your phrase gazing into a crystal ball is probably quite apt because none of us know what's going to be in the spending review on the 30th of October. We're obviously making representations both as the combined authority but also members of the Urban Transport Group alongside all of our similar organisations across the country as well about what we would like to see in terms of the budget proposals from the new government. Obviously, we've had a precursor to some of that from the Prime Minister and others about where they see the finances. So I think we'll have more clarity post the spending review on the 30th of October and then whatever the spring budget brings next year as well. Our ask is to make sure that we have long-term certainty around public transport funding alongside other things that are part of the wider combined authority functions as well. And certainly we wouldn't want to see less funding. We want to see at least the level of funding that we've got sustained, but we won't know that until after the spending review.
Councillor Nicholas.
In the light of Anne's comments, I'm looking at reasons for recommending preferred option 6.1 and in the recommendation itself. Adam, can you clarify what you mean by the relevant MEG, which was in the recommendation, and then you said MEG. So because there is a view that perhaps all MEGs should be involved in this, which means a lot more work for you because of the very important aspects of what this paper is about.
We're happy to engage as many Megs as interested in this area. I think that member engagement is really important. So the S probably should have been added in the report. It was I suppose Councillor looks, but he didn't pick up as a grammatical error. But yeah, we're happy to engage as many Megs as the committee sees fit.
Thank you very much for that very positive response. The next part of the question then, again from Anne's contribution, is the clarity of winter 24/25. Clearly, we cannot have discussion until after the settlement to be so we actually know what we're talking about. So is there a rough timetable that you've got in mind in order to because we're going to get our diaries in order as well, so that'd be very helpful.
I think that's something we'll work through depending on what is published. So things we thought that were going quite slow are actually becoming quite quick. So for example, the Better Buses bill we expected to be early next year, and it's been published, or parts of it may be published today. So things are moving quite quickly. I think we'll try and map out in terms of where we think that kind of initial engagement can take place. And I think it will be a long conversation. So I think, for example, around the devolution framework, we know that there will be a white paper published and then a bill to follow probably next year. Some of the transport bits may move a bit quicker in terms of the Better Buses bill and the 2 rail bills, which seem to be progressing very quickly and a lot quicker than we actually expected.
I know, just a final point then. Can we have those links as and when appropriate? Because we could do that background reading, and I think that would be extremely helpful, especially the one today.
Yeah, we'll send that.
Thank you, Chair.
And just on your point, John, about Megs, I would encourage Meg chairs, all 6 of you, if there's something that you want Adam or David to bring to your committee and to personally present, to get in touch with them directly and request that. And I'm sure they will both be very accommodating towards that. Councillor Alden.
Thank you. Adam, you mentioned about budget submissions. I just wanted to get some clarity on that. So are we making sure we have also submitted the reasons why we need to keep funding that has been promised at Mandela but hasn't necessarily come through yet because it's for future years? Because obviously a lot of the mood music nationally at the moment is there's going to be cuts to budgets. What we don't want to see is the Command Authority not only not getting additional money but losing money it's got. So we're making sure we're getting ministers cited on the justifications for keeping the funding streams that we've got coming down the line already.
Yeah, that's our starting point, and that we're making that case as robustly as we can, using some of the critical research that have been undertaken as part of the department we work in around the importance of bus, which probably was set out in the Command Authority reports around for every £1 spent, we think it's about £15 goes back into the economy around the bus network. So that's our start point, and we're making sure that officials and ministers and anyone wants to listen to us that's our starting point on those financial asks, and making sure that we maintain, but also the longer term things that was committed previously.
Thank you.
I've got 2 questions. On 4.10, you talk about previous indicative allocations, such as Crusts 2, could be subject to change as part of the spending review on 30th of October. Could you just provide a briefing note as to what the indicative allocation was in Crusts 2? I think we actually put some headline figures as to what it was going towards as part of Crusts 2. We've got a baseline comparison for when the spending review actually comes out, and we know what our actual allocation is going to be. And in terms of 5.4 of the report and the urban transport group, Councillor McNicholas and I will both remember the special interest group, the transport special interest group of the urban transport group. I think all members would actually like to know more about the Urban Transport Group and what it actually does, especially if, as you say, we're going to be working through them as detailed in 5.4. And again, if you could circulate that around to members, I think we'd all be very interested in what opportunities there are in working with them in terms of helping us for this deeper Devo deal.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. We can arrange for both of those notes to be produced and we'll send those round to members.
Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, when people are asking questions, if you can please, as a request, if you can look around people raising hands, then we don't get embarrassed raising again and again. So, right. So this is a good paper. And especially...
Could you use your microphone, please?
Thank you. It is a good paper, and especially regarding single settlement, because this will stop, our offices wasting time and writing bits again and again. So this is a good progress. But my understanding is that we have Crest 1, money is allocated just over £1 billion. And then we have 2.2 billion Crest 2, which takes us up to 2030 or 32 or something like that. But that money is not in a bag, is it? It's not in a bank, right? So that is an issue. But for the moment, I think we are encouraged that the previous government and the present government, hopefully, as far as our capital settlement is concerned, is for a long period of time. But where we are worried about is the revenue budget. We have basic money, right, for 3 years, £80 million, for which I think we spent £40 million already on revenue budget. And that's what I want to know. Where are we in this, devolution deal, far as the revenue budget is concerned? Is there any discussions? I mean, I would like to see that, from our region, there is a lot of income tax is being paid to Treasury. Is there any discussion that we want that money back here?
So on the plus 2, it's not futures funding, but I think what we're doing as part of the report that we took on the capital programme, we're still trying to plan for that 10-year horizon. So a lot of our big schemes don't happen in 5 years. We all know that if you think about some of the big stuff we've been building over the last few years. So having that planning certainty is something that we're still kind of considering and planning on. And that's some of the part of the submissions that we'll make to government around that, about if you want to improve urban transport and build things like bus rapid transit and metros, you need a long-term planning window on that. In terms of the revenue budget, that's part of the conversation around single settlement. We know we need to kind of resolve that issue around the MTFP, and it's also working with our local authorities, because they, all of our authorities are in difficult positions, and working with them about making sure that local government funding also becomes part of the longer term horizon around 4 and 5 years. So on the kind of local retention, that is something that we're looking some CA colleagues around what they're calling local investment levers. That's something that's being looked at, but it's very early days, and we're just trying to test the water around what's government's appetite around that.
Any supplementary, Councillor Akhtar?
Another question to Anne. We have basic money for a while now, and that money was to be spent to promoting the bus network, and also spending on infrastructure locally. So where are we on that?
got all the details of, there is ongoing work within BSIP funding for ticket incentives, etc. And we can probably do you a note in terms of what was allocated and where we are with that. Obviously, the capital programme for bus improvements is part of the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, which we've updated on previously as well. So what we don't know for next year is any further BSIP allocations. I think, again, that will be tied up within the spending review, but you're quite right that the revenue allocations, apart from all these other funds, so the bus service operator grant, the national concessionary scheme grant, and also BSIP, is becoming quite complex to understand where all of the bus funding comes from. One of the things that I'd like to see is a bit simplification around funding, and then that long-term certainty around revenue as well, which is of course what we are promoting as part of the stuff that Adam and David are supporting us on around the devolution and single settlement funds as well. But until we've seen what's in the government plans on the 30th of October, I think it's difficult for us to say, but we can give you an update as to where we are with the current BSIP arrangements.
I'm going to call you back for supplementary, don't worry, Councillor Carr, but as I understand it, an update on the bus network proposals from January 25 is coming to the Combined Authority Board on the 11th of October, and indeed you're, I think, presenting on it. And would BSIP and BSOC and all the other funding be covered within that report?
So that particular report is looking at the stabilisation and funding to sustain the current network, or with some minor changes that we currently have. So the agreement that we've got with the bus operators today, which ends on the 31st of December, we need to have something that starts on the 1st of January in order to sustain and stabilise the bus network as it stands at the moment. And that will use a combination of different funding that will be reported to the CA board in the 11th of October, probably in private session as well, just because of the commercial arrangements within that.
And as promised, your supplementary, Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Clarification is good. For us to understand all these finances is crucial, and the note is good. But what I'm more interested is the outcome. This is a crucial money to incentivize to people to use bus network more. So please, and it is the outcome that money you spend, the measures you take, how effective they are, and that will be proof in the pudding. How many more the patronage, how that will be increased. That's what we need to know actually.
Okay, I think that you've given that message loud and clear, Councillor Carr. Thank you for that. Could I ask you to turn your microphone off? Because Councillor Clements.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think Anne's actually preempted the question I was going to ask, because I noticed the reference to the review of the bus service operator grant at paragraph 4.15 in the report, and I really just wanted to put in the plea that can we please put the case to government for longer term funding for buses, so that we avoid all the cliff edges that we've seen over the last couple of years where we only get an extension of funding for 3 months. So I was very pleased to hear what Anne's just said in terms of the case that's been made both as the West Midlands CA, Transport for West Midlands, and through Urban Transport Group. And then just in terms of the legislation that's going through for Great British Railways, I hope that we are doing all we can to ensure that the role of the West Midlands Rail Executive is enhanced by that and not undermined in any way, because the Rail Exec is something quite unique in this region and gives us a degree of democratic oversight and accountability over the rail network, which I don't think is present in other regions. And I hope that we're going to get really enhanced partnership with the rail industry and the government as we move forward to hopefully public ownership of rail as franchises expire. But I just hope that we're giving a strong message and speaking up for that executive, because it plays a really important role. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comments. And of course, the West Midlands Rail Executive and how it affects rail transport in the West Midlands comes within Councillor Auden's remit as the MEC champion for rail, metro and sprint. Councillor Hyatt.
So, all right, Chair, my question was answered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. I can't see anyone else indicating to speak. So thank you very much, Adam and David. And of course, we get to David part 2 later on in our LTP briefing at 1:30. So item 6, rapid transit corridor studies, and this is Sandeep. Sandeep, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the paper is to provide an update on where we are with a number of rapid transit corridor studies that are currently underway across the region, and some of the progress that's been made around that work and what some of the outputs will be. So rapid transit, also known as mass rapid transit, is a fast, high-capacity fixed-link public transport provision with high levels of segregation from general traffic, and we have one light rail line which is being extended at the moment across the West Midlands, so people know the sort of system that we are talking about. So mass rapid transit, along with our suburban and regional rail, provides a structural backbone of our metropolitan public transport system. This isn't just around the West Midlands, but this is a fairly common structure around high capacity public transport across many cities around the world. It can be a more attractive way of moving people than private car, and where those systems are integrated, that obviously helps in terms of accessibility to skills, employment, education, and so on. And just in terms of that policy context, and I know you have your local transport plan session later on, but a big part of that is sort of nestled within LTP5, which is around the 45-minute region, and supporting the 5 objectives of the local transport. So across the UK, we have a number of forms of mass rapid transit. That's bus rapid transit, light rail, tram train, metro and subways. In the West Midlands, we are largely focusing on light rail and bus rapid transit, so Sprint, but also considering the opportunities for very light rail, which will also have a role, and this will be informed by the current research and development activity that is going on across Coventry and their demonstrator project, which should be delivered in the coming 12 to 18 months. In terms of the work that we're doing in the paper, we set out a process flowchart. This is largely the process that has been dictated and supported by DFT through their best practice guidance in terms of transport appraisal. And it sets out a very clear and evidence-based approach for undertaking these corridor studies. This isn't coming at it with predetermined solution around we want to build the metro or BRT. This is very much building a consistent evidence base to inform what solution for the corridors that we are looking at. The network itself that's been defined through the local transport plan has been developed following an assessment of high volume corridors and looking at which strategic centres need to be linked, but also looking at where there are some current gaps in that service provision at the moment. And that's the work that's been emerging through the local transport plan. And these priority corridors have been identified through a combination of consultancy support and a number of other factors, things like indices of multiple deprivation, demand, numbers of jobs accessible, the practical feasibility of some of these options, and that broader fit and alignment with wider WMCA objectives, and also considering local environmental impacts. These were all covered off within the LTP public consultation draft on Big Move, and that's the chapter on public transport. So in the paper, there is the broader that of showing that entire core network across the West Midlands in terms of all forms of rapid transit connectivity that could be developed. In terms of the priority corridors, we have a list which is set out on page 24 of your document pack, and we are currently undertaking a series of studies on a number of those, which are largely funded through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, but also utilising some of the capacity funding that has come forward. And as I've said, the key focus here is around getting a consistent level of development work done across all these corridors to understand the case for rapid transit interventions and the preferred mode to be taken forward as part of that. just very quickly, and some of those headline milestones, the most advanced one at the moment is the East Birmingham North Solid Hull corridor, which ties into a wider regeneration piece, and obviously one of the levelling up zones that's been identified within the West Midlands. The strategic outline case has been submitted into our single assurance framework, so we await to take that forward into outline business case development. All the others that are listed there are sort of following that same process in terms of doing the SOCs, the strategic outline cases, to then form future development. And that's the key aspect here is a consistent approach that's being taken across all of these corridor studies that we are taking forward. I will leave it at that, Chair, in terms of just the headlines from the report. Happy to take any questions from the committee or any queries as a result of your paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. I'm always going to call Councillor Nicholas first.
Oh,
So,
well, I'm going to be unashamedly parochial with my questions, and I will take the opportunity. I'm looking at the regional map, Sandeep, and what is very evident, Coventry, apart from the motorway, is connected by rail. And thank you, Councillor Archer, for deciphering the key. I mean, I couldn't read it, it's impossible. However, the point I'm making, and this is probably an historical question, because of the past, we always had an aspirational link from the airport to Coventry for the metro. Just to recognise that Coventry should be connected as part of the conurbation. So I think my question is in relation to why has that disappeared? Why are we still effectively isolated from the conurbation other than rail and the M6, when there really should be a rapid transit corridor so that we can connect to the West Midlands? And my second question is probably, again, parochial, but nevertheless, having a better understanding of what the Fossil corridor proposal is. I think the three councillors would be very interested in its development. It's now on the ground. I mean, I experience the works on a daily basis, but nevertheless, I'd like a briefing, and I dare say other colleagues would want briefing in relation to their localities to ensure that they are fully au fait with what the proposals are. So, can we have a link to the conurbation, please? It might be the Eastern Green Tile Hill proposal.
and before I call Sandeep on to answer that, I'm assuming that the new station study, which includes a new railway station in Coventry, is fed into this whole process.
So just thanks, Chair. Just in terms of that point, yes, they will be. So it is looking at all the things in the mix at the moment. So Councillor McNicholas, in terms of your question around those routes, I will need to go back and look at the work that's been done around prioritisation. I absolutely know, going back a long time, there were various proposals around particularly bus rapid transit, linking from the airport NEC to Coventry, various routes along the A45. So I will go back and look at how they have featured in the assessment that's been done to date, and I will come back to you on that question.
Could you do the three councillors, please?
Yes, I will do. And in terms of the Falls Hill corridor, this is one of the highlighted corridors as a priority. We haven't started doing that work yet, but as with all of these corridor studies, as we
started, so it started on the ribbon roundabout. It started.
yes, that's another project that's ongoing. So it's not the rapid transit
Oh, right.
study that we're
Right.
looking at. So that is a separate piece of work that we will commission in due course. And with all of these studies, what we are doing is making sure that we have the right governance around them. So one, the right representation from respective local authority partners, but also who are the key stakeholder groups that we need to engage as we continue that work. So that will absolutely happen as part of those studies as they come forward.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Chair. My curiosity was aroused by the assumption of the demand increase anticipated in paragraph 4.10. A decade ago in 2013-14, there were 4.6 billion bus journeys taken nationally. This has fallen to 4.1 billion in 2019-20 and down to 3.4 billion in the latest 2023 figures. COVID demonstrated the compelling benefits of working from home, which eliminates time wasted in commuting and brings down costs both for employers and employees. The reduction in commuting directly affects bus services. Now that my 80-year-old wife has learned to do her weekly shop online, I also think that bus services for shopping is also set for significant decline. As fully automated EV cars become mainstream, low-cost individual transport will become available in direct competition to taxis and Uber, further reducing the demand for bus services. I'm concerned that we should be able to maintain current levels of bus services on declining numbers of passengers in the face of pressures on government for funding other and possibly higher priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. And as you rightly point out, there are a number of factors which have led to decreases in bus patronage nationally. And we have seen a gradual decline in the West Midlands over many, many years as well. That is a national backdrop that we have seen. However, there are some really good elements of work that have been done to continue bolstering the use of bus, and bus is the backbone here in the West Midlands. And we have seen increases in bus patronage happen over the past year in particular. So we've got 232 million journeys made during the last year, and that has actually grown from 212 million the previous year. As we say, there are a number of factors around that. But if we start to distill the reasons why, yes, we recognise that there are a number of other options out there, and this is why the LTP is really important in terms of setting that strategic direction for how do we ensure that there is the right level of accessibility for all the residents across the West Midlands. We still suffer from some of the highest levels of deprivation in parts of the West Midlands, also some of the lowest levels of car ownership in parts of the region, where people do rely on public transport to access skills, education, healthcare, leisure, shopping, and all the other reasons why people need to use public transport. The purpose of this work is really to build on where that demand exists. And it's not just about the existing demand, but where does that future demand come from? Where do some of the new developments go, both in terms of commercial or housing, and making sure we provide the right connectivity to those in a way that is commensurate for those corridors. And as I said right at the outset, this isn't always about building a light rail scheme. It could be an improved bus service. And one of the things that we have done a lot of, which has helped grow that patronage, is removing some of the barriers to bus use. So one of the biggest factors is journey time reliability, because we don't have the levels of priority across our network for public transport. They're competing with the existing traffic. Where we have seen some really good targeted interventions on the A34 and the A45 as part of the first phase of sprint delivery, we have seen a significant increase in bus reliability, but also a corresponding increase in patronage as a result of that. So there are a number of things that we need to do. This is not being taken in isolation, and you absolutely point out a whole series of factors that we need to consider. And the work that colleagues David, Adam and others are doing on the LTP really focuses on some of those big challenges that we've got, particularly around the competition from other modes, but how do we ensure that the public transport system does what it needs to do for the businesses, residents, communities across the West Midlands.
I'm going to call you back in a second, Councillor Kay, for your supplementary. I'll also say you mentioned the A34 North, you mentioned the A45. There's also the B425 Load Lane through Solihull, which in terms of sprint, which
I believe TFWM have worked very closely with Solihull Council on that. Isn't that correct? That is correct. Yeah.
Starts today.
Yes, starts today. Phase 2. Yeah. Yes, phase 2 starts today. Councillor Kay, for your supplementary.
Yes, thank you. I fully accept that there's been some bounce back after COVID. However, the long-term trend is systemic, and I'm concerned that we have at the top of our list the question of sustainability of bus services and the viability. I travelled in on a train. There was about 2 passengers per carriage, and if we get the same situation with the buses, they're not going to be green and they're not going to be viable. So it is, you know, I fully accept that specific routes may benefit as you propose, but we also have to be aware of the overall picture. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, just to come back on that, you're absolutely right, Councillor. This is, like I say, this is not sort of being taken forward in isolation. There's a whole series of the sort of policy measures that need to be at play here. And your point around demand, again, this is the whole point of doing the work, is to understand what is the demand. Does it warrant that level of investment for those passenger flows that we predict, either that they're there now or will be there in the future as a result of additional growth or new developments of housing, etc. And that's why those corridors have been identified. The purpose of the work is to determine, is there a case for investment? And that investment case also needs to be built around that commercial and financial sustainability. We cannot be adding to the public transport system that needs continued subsidy. That is already a challenge at the moment. So it is around, can these routes be viable, both from a financial and commercial point of view, in terms of maintaining that overall sustainability.
Thank you, Sandy. I've got 4 councillors indicating to speak, so I'm going to take them in this order: Councillor Hyatt, Councillor Clements, Councillor Alden, and Councillor Clark. If your name's not on the list, you want to speak, please do indicate. Councillor Hyatt.
Thank you very much, Chair. On page 22, the first 3 bullet points, I'd like an addition, because it says we've got a core network where we're talking about mostly quarter up and go frequency buses. And then we mentions a secondary bus network with lower frequency bus and demand responsive transport providing comprehensive network coverage. Kind of suggests that we add wind in mind to that list. It's an omission and I think it needs to be there.
That was covered off under demand responsive.
No, they're definitely two different things. One for the most vulnerable and one is available.
I will pass that on to my policy colleagues because this has been taken from the LTP.
So please could that change take place? And then the other thing is that Very Light Rail has the possibility of being really quite transformational and the options that it brings. So whilst we argue for and welcome, rapid transport systems for buses, the options need always to remain open, don't they? Because, we need to wait to see what the results will be in Coventry. And I notice on 4.4, you've got detailed plans for tram and tram style bus routes. These bus routes that are options for change, certainly with respect to New Cross and Wolverhampton, it's gone from, bus to metro, there no rapid transport routes. You're keeping the options for change very clearly open in the plans that you're drawing up, because we don't know the results from Coventry yet.
Thank you, Councillor. You're absolutely right. We are, and this is the whole purpose of the work, we're being totally modally agnostic in the work that we do. And that needs to be driven by the levels of demand, what sort of system works well, both taking into account the physical characteristics of a corridor, what can physically be delivered, and meet the wider objectives. In terms of ELR, we are working very closely with the team in Coventry. We are supporting the VLR programme director directly through TFWM, sort of actually splitting that workload between TFWM and Coventry to continue to push on the R&D elements in the demonstrator project. Many of the studies that I've mentioned have actually been funded by the regional very light rail programme, and very light rail is being assessed as part of those studies as an option. So that absolutely is within the work that is currently underway.
I'd just like to back up Councillor Hyatt's comment, because there's a paper going to the board on the 11th of October entitled Provision of Ring and Ride and Demand Responsive Transport for the Region. So it's very separately divided up. So I think Councillor Hyatt has a very, very fair point there. Councillor Clements.
Thanks very much, Tim. Yeah, I just wanted to make a general observation about the importance of rapid transit and mass transit, because I just think we're in a region of a 4 million population. It's largely a conurbation, and we simply need these rapid transport links as the most efficient way of moving people around. I mean, I take the point that this work is mode neutral, but I suppose I feel as an advocate for bus, we know that bus and dedicated bus lanes work, and they are a great way of moving around a lot of people rapidly. If the buses can move freely on the road, whereas some of the other work, obviously on the very light rail, is in development. And I would really welcome a presentation on that and more information about whether it genuinely is going to be cheaper, and whether it is going to help us get around the problems of say having to move utilities or dig around utilities for trams, etc. On this 5.5, there's after the list of the timescales for each of the schemes, where I know some of them are quite distant. There's a big caveat, isn't there, that this is all dependent on business cases, but also getting the resources in through the second round of CRSTS. So what is the likelihood of that? Because if you look at the paper that Anne had to take to the board for leaders in July, a lot of our ambitions for transport at the moment are quite constrained by lack of resources. So how realistic are some of those deadlines? In our the pre-meeting that we had before the meeting, we were looking at the deadlines for East Birmingham, which is obviously of interest to Birmingham councillors, because that route is really crucial for economic development in Birmingham and social justice, because it passes through the most deprived area in Birmingham. And again, that takes us back to the importance of mass transit, because there's a reason why city region areas, like the area around Munich or Stuttgart, Lyon, Milan, have got higher levels of productivity, lower unemployment, and high levels of GDP per capita, and that is to do with them having an excellent, dense, integrated public transport network. So I actually see the mass transit and rapid transport corridors as being really, really crucial for the economic success of the region, and also for addressing social injustice. Because for the people in Birmingham, in some wards, our inner city wards, the level of households that don't have access to a vehicle is as high as 47%. So some of our residents in Birmingham absolutely do rely on bus to get to work, get to training opportunities, kids to get to school. Their whole life is centred around having that easy access to public transport. So I just think that this work is so important, and I really want to understand if these timescales are realistic and whether any of them can be pushed forward. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clements. Before I call Sandeep, I was going to say that, again, we come back to our crystal ball and what's going to happen in the spending review in terms of Crusts 2 on the 30th of October as to how realistic these are. We can only go at the moment, I'm assuming, on the indicative provisional allocation for Crusts 2. But this is one of the reasons why I asked Sandeep to bring this paper today about rapid transit corridor studies and where we are, to build on it and to take the views of members. Having said that, over to you, Sandeep.
Thanks, thank you, Councillor Clements. So just going to the point, I mean, Councillor Huxtable has raised, the point around CRSTS2 funding, and we are sort of depending on what emerges from that. But where I would like to be is to make sure that we have a series of corridors that are developed up to a point and are mature enough to be making a strong case for funding within CRSTS2. We have a long history of developing rapid transit corridors across the West Midlands. Yes, they do take time because they can often be complex. They can often be quite controversial in places, recognising that we do have some significant constraints on the network. But the work that we need to do needs to be absolutely robust, and we have used the indicative guidelines of what a robust outline business case would take. If that was a light rail intervention, that would need to flex further with potential Transport and Works Act powers, etc. That would need to fall into that development space as well. So we are trying to keep an open mind on the broad indicative timescale. As we continue to mature the work, we will be able to refine that better and have a clear sense of the outputs that are emerging, or indeed the case that is emerging for some of these corridors to move into further development. It's fair to say that there are a number of corridors here, and whilst resources are always constrained, and even if there is a significant chunk of funding within CRSTS, it is unlikely that we would be able to fund all of these in one go, or indeed deliver them all in one go. So it's about getting the right level of robust work done to allow us then to prioritise those corridors for funding in future delivery phases. It's recognised the point around East Birmingham, and we are working very closely with the East Birmingham board on feeding in the elements around the work we've done to date, but also as the emerging work is taking place on the place-based strategies being led on by Birmingham and Solihull for that corridor as well. And just coming back to your point around VLR, I would be more than happy to get my colleague Nicola here to do a presentation on where we are with the VLR programme at a future committee meeting.
And sorry, after you, Councillor Clement.
Just to say, I'd very much welcome that, Sandy, because I've got, I'm genuinely open-minded, but I've heard a lot about this, and what I know is that there's this, a short stretch of demonstration track, and so it's my frustration is, that just looking at our region, we need solutions that we can implement quickly, and this, this VR seems to be in development, and I'd like some information about other places where a similar system is in operation, and how quickly it's been possible to implement that, and what the cost savings are. But also just does it actually solve some of the engineering challenges? Yeah, so just something to think about for the future.
No, absolutely. We can. There is a whole programme of work, including testing of the track form for use on conventional light rail vehicles, which will be happening soon as well. So I think it would be good to bring that update back so you can see the amount of work that is going on in that space. The only other point I'm going to make around this one, Councillor Clements, is there will also probably be a new mass rapid transit policy emerging from the Department of Transport based on some conversations we've had recently with them, and a recognition that there are a number of areas that are revisiting their mass rapid transit strategies and approaches, including West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. So we are working together with DFT to make sure we are learning from all of that work that is ongoing, particularly when it comes to trying to streamline some of those processes that we all know are required for delivering major interventions of this type.
Chair, can I just say, I suppose one of my anxieties, I have a slight anxiety that people may think that they're too posh to get the bus, whereas the bus is absolutely the workhorse of the transport system in this region. And and whoever mentioned, I think Tim mentioned the progress that's been made on the A34 and the A45 in terms of more rapid journey times. So we know how to speed up those bus journeys and to make them more attractive to people. And if you start to use the bus, you can see that it's a really good way to get around already. And other things that have happened, like the bonfire of bus tickets under the the bus service improvement plan, that has also led to an increase of patronage on buses. So I mean, I'm banging on about it because I'm a big fan of buses, and I think they already provide the solutions that we need to tackle congestion, air quality and carbon emissions. And I have this slight fear that we're always hoping for something shinier, more glamorous, when we've actually got a solution there already. Thank you.
I don't think anyone is in any doubt that you're a big fan of buses, Councillor Clements. I would I would also point out that in terms of metro, of course, we have used metro on disused rail tracks. A lot of Route 1 was on a disused rail track, and there are possibilities across the West Midlands for light rail on disused railway tracks. So, for example, possibly going on from Stourbridge to Roundabout, etc. I'm going to move it on at this point and to Councillor Alden.
Thank you. Just wanted to pick up a couple of points. When you look at 4.10, it picks up this idea that once some of the bus routes are in there, demand increases, we might upgrade those to sprint on metro. Just wanted to, well, really, it's a question of how realistic is that really? Not on the increase of demand, but on the fact that with resources being historically, would suggest in the region relatively tight on putting in new lines, it is unlikely once we've spent a chunk of money upgrading a line that we're then going to come back and upgrade that to be a metro when there are other areas that won't have had any investment, isn't it, realistically? So it's just making sure that I think we need to get it right the first time and not rely upon being able to come back and put more investment on lines that have already been put in place. So for instance, you think of the Hagley Road in the south of Birmingham or west of Birmingham, you know, the demand locally generally is around wanting the metro line to be extended. It comes down to the top of the Hagley Road. And there seems to be, from certainly also I see and from people I speak to, far more interest in having that go down than having an improved bus network that you don't have to change halfway on the journey to town. So I think it's just making sure we're getting the right system in the right place. And on that point, I wanted to pick up on 5.2 and 5.4. So 5.2 lists the 8 priority transit corridors. 5.4 picks up the ones that have progressed so far. Currently, the Birmingham to Sutton Coldfield one to the north of the city isn't in that list in 5.4, it's progressed. I think that therefore just gives us an opportunity to make sure a piece of work is done before more money is spent on that one, making sure that it doesn't jeopardise the proposed improvements to the train line that run parallel. Again, in the north of the city, it is absolutely vital that a place like Castlevale, which is one of the most deprived communities in the city, get connected to employment opportunities by the reopening of the Tamworth line and the Sutton Park line. That is on the railway line. That would not be served by this bus route if that came in. My concern is if the bus route comes in first, the business case of the rail line will get destroyed, and therefore that community never gets access to the rapid transport that's needed. So please, can we get a piece of work done to see if that line progresses, does it destroy the business case of the railway line? Because that railway line really needs to be reopened.
And before Sandeep answers that, I would just say that that's why I said earlier on in this discussion about the new station study feeding into this rapid transit corridor study, not just in the case of Solihull, but also in the case of Castlevale in Birmingham, which would also serve, I think, Castle Bromwich, the Castle Bromwich neighbourhood as well.
Thank you, Councillor Alden. So in terms of the first question around having the right mode and the right solution, that's exactly what this work is trying to get to. In terms of the whole thing around could you actually upgrade routes in the future, this is something that is done across Europe quite significantly. Lots of examples in France and Spain, and we are looking to other examples where bus rapid transit routes or express routes have been converted into light rail over a number of years. And it largely comes down to 2 or 3 factors. The first one is providing the levels of segregation and priority. That's what you deliver as part of your initial investment, and that helps build demand. It is about the timing of the right solution at the right time. We touched on earlier the need to make sure that these things are commercially viable and that we don't end up having to subsidise these. So sometimes it's that stretch between what is commercially viable versus, well, you could actually deliver a fixed track system like a light rail scheme, but there would be an issue around the overall sort of commercial sustainability in the absence of that demand growing. But this is where the work is really trying to get to pinpoint what is that likely demand going to be, so we do get the right solution at the right point in time. But let's not rule out potentially what could evolve in the future. Just on your other point around the local railway stations on the A38 North corridor, Yes, and one of the things that isn't highlighted within the report, but one of the things that we are doing as part of the wider assessment is not just thinking about linear routes here connecting one place to another. There is the wider connectivity that needs to happen and the extraction that could actually help or hinder other transport interventions. So that absolutely will be looked at as part of the work that is undertaken. Supplementary, Council.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the answers. Just on your first answer, just wanted to pick up, obviously there's this issue between how European countries fund metro rollouts that compared to our country around the utilities costs. Obviously, the way the legislation set up in this country, the public sector picks up far more of those utility costs than they do in Europe. So it's just warning that sums might not add up in the same way about the upgrading of lines, and just assuming that because it works there, it would happen here. I'd have some caveats about that until a change in the way the utilities costs is handled.
This is where it comes right back down to what other innovations can we bring to this, and particularly the VLR track. Could we actually utilise that for traditional light rail vehicles as well as VLR? And those are the things. My references to the European examples were largely around the build-up of demand and the levels of segregation and priority, but also the disruption that comes from having to convert something into light rail in the future, and how do you manage that in terms of dealing with passengers and the existing demand.
Thank you.
And my final comment is that we're all here to represent the entire region, the West Midlands, as members, but please do use our local expertise, because we're talking about East Birmingham, North Hill. We have Councillor Ward representing East Birmingham Ward. We have Councillor Kay representing the North Birmingham Ward. When we talk about the Camp Hill line, we've got Councillor Locke. Councillor Nicholas has volunteered his services and services of other ward councillors in terms of the Coventry corridor. And of course, when we talk about Sprint Phase 2 and Walsall, we've got Councillor Soho and Councillor Singh. So, please do use our expertise as members, because while we're here to represent the entire region, we do have specific local knowledge. Sandeep. Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sandeep. So far as I'm concerned, I'd love to see in our region a synchronized, integrated transport system which serves our communities and serves our businesses. And thank you, all of you, the work all of you do in our region. We've gone through a very difficult time because of COVID, but Coventry's preferred mass transit solution is very light rail, as opposed to metro and sprint schemes. Now, as to very light rail, we know what's going on with metro, millions and millions and millions of pounds being spent. And for the moment, we are still struggling. And that is why we have approached Warwick University and other people in our city, but this isn't just Coventry plan. It is a regional plan, and Dudley, my colleagues from Dudley will understand most of the track and the vehicle is tested there, and I think we got it. It's fine. And the first demonstrator will happen from station to Coventry City Centre. My understanding is, and the briefing we had in Coventry, that it will cost £10 million per metre, whereas I'm sure you will correct me if I'm wrong, £30 million when it comes to metro. And then we have a terrible vehicles from Spain which have track chases now, and most of the time is not running. So this could be the answer. But Sandeep, you know better than I do, sir, that the Work Act and all that, the previous government was hopeless and they were not willing to fund very light rail. We have the funding to put the track in from station to city centre, I think, and the vehicle, but we can't charge money because we need Work Act and things like that, I'm sure. And yes, we need a briefing here. I say, when you said that CREST will be funding these projects and programs, you use another word, capacity funding. So that's something new for me. So because, forgive my ignorance, where did that come from?
As part of the CRSTS programme, there is an element of capacity funding which is allocated to local authorities and Transport for West Midlands, and that is designed to support some of that early work that cannot be capitalised against some of the larger budgets that are within CRSTS. So that's where we are funding the work for the Coventry to Gigafactory corridor going forwards.
So how much is it?
If you read 10.4 of the report on page 27, it says Coventry to Gigafactory has 125,000 allocated by the CRSTS capacity fund, which was approved in May 2024.
Good.
So hopefully that answers your question. And I also know that in 10.3, we're also utilising funds from the investment programme for another corridor. So it's not just CRISP's money.
It's a combination of funding sources, and it comes back, Councillor Akhtar, to this comment that I've made before about trying to get all of these corridors to a certain level of development. So we absolutely understand what we are taking forward into future development. Your points around Coventry are very well taken and made. We are working very closely with the team of Coventry and Dudley on the very light rail programme, and you can pick out some of the areas that we are keen to see as well in terms of how does this actually help rapid transit delivery across the region and broader, but really want to work with Coventry to mature the current work to date and move it away from the R&D into something which is more concrete, and the demonstrator project will help with that quite massively.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clements, you wanted to come back.
Yeah, it was just a comment about the validity or otherwise of comparisons with other competitor European city regions, and I think yes, obviously, in a German city region, the TFWM equivalent, the Verkehrsverbund, is in a very different position. It's got more funding, operates the services directly, and can integrate. But we've seen already in this agenda that officers have told us that they're surprised at how quickly the new government has moved with the legislation on both rail and buses. So I think we're at a time where we should actually be using our positions through committees like this, scrutineers, or engaging with the leaders of this CA to ask for changes and more powers to actually make really transformational changes to the transport system in this region, because that's what's going to unlock economic growth and tackle some of the really entrenched issues of inequality, unemployment, poverty that we've got across the region. Because we all know if you can't get to work or training or education, then your life chances are severely affected. So I agree. At the moment we're in an utterly different position to some of those other European cities, but I think we should have the aspiration and understand how you can actually do things a bit differently and actually go with our asks to the government. Because what I've experienced, I was thinking about that this morning when I was listening to the Today programme, when they had a lot of coverage of the Better Buses bill. That I was 18 in 1986 when buses were deregulated, and since then there's been a decline overall in bus usage. And actually we need to try and flip that on its head now and actually plan for growth and more availability of public transport for all sorts of reasons, not least the need to tackle the climate emergency. So I think we should look out and everywhere we can for examples of best practice, and obviously we don't need to go abroad. We've got the examples of London and what's happening in Manchester and Liverpool. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I take that as a comment more than a question, but I would also say that's why I specifically asked Adam and David to give an update on the urban transport group that we're working through in terms of the Devo deal, the deeper Devo deal. And thank you for your comments, Councillor Clements.
Thank you.
Right, if there's no other person indicating to speak on this, I'd just like to say, Sandeep, thank you very much for a very comprehensive report, and look forward to seeing how this progresses. Of course, any legislation that we talk about has to be backed up the finance to actually put it in practice, and for our aspirations to become realities on the ground. But we look forward to how these rapid transport corridor studies progress in the future, and we'll be asking you back to give us updates on this.
Thank you, Chair.
Item 7, therefore, which is the Combined Authority Board Summary Report. Over to you, Anne.
So one of the areas that you asked for Scrutiny to be able to do is to sort of look at what is coming up on the CA board in a little bit more detail, and to be able to input into those reports as well. For the 11th of October board, there are 4 papers that are due to go. One is around bus depot strategy, and that is looking at what we need to do in terms of enabling us to increase competition for bus operators in this location by removing some of the barriers for entry, providing depot space, and then also thinking about depots where they will need to be retrofitted for decarbonisation, to for electric bus fleets and so on as well. That's already been to the investment board or discussed with the investment panel as well. Another one is around the bus network stabilisation, which is something that you've already mentioned in this committee, and that is looking for the agreement for 2025, where we'll be able to maintain the existing bus network with some minor changes to make sure that we've got a functioning bus network for next year, and a funding agreement with local operators as well. And that is obviously in the interim period whilst we're exploring wider bus reform, which will help us make sure that we do keep the 232 million journeys by bus a year working as well. The other one is around the provision of ring and ride and also demand responsive transport, looking at a new target operating model. We have got an existing contract with Meet, and we will be looking to re-let certain contracts around ring and ride. And again, I think it's already been mentioned by this committee about the importance of ring and ride, particularly for the more vulnerable who are unable to use traditional public transport and have no access to any other means of transport as well. So that will be discussed as part of the board. And then, of course, the road safety action plan. I think it's worthwhile pointing out that the road safety strategy was already agreed by the board last year, and this is the action plan that will take us through from 2024 to 2030. And there are a number of actions that have been recommended that need to be worked through and brought forward for a wide range of delivery partners. So from West Midlands Police, our local authorities, the fire service, the combined authority itself as well, in terms of how we address what we're seeing killed and seriously injured figures as well. And that is obviously responding to what's also in the LTP around Vision Zero, and by reducing casualties by 50%, deaths and casualties by 50% by 2030, and then improving on that post 2030 as well. So they're the 4 reports that are going to the Combined Authority Board on the 11th of October. Some of those I think have already been discussed at member engagement groups as well, but this is the opportunity for sort of any further debate that we can collect information that you may want us to add into those reports. Given the timing, the reports themselves are not finalised, so not able to bring you the actual reports today as well, but opportunity for comments to be fed into those reports.
And in terms of our ability to feed into reports, I see this as a critical function of this scrutiny committee. I've got 2 indications to speak, Councillor Alden and Councillor Clement. So I'm going to call Councillor Alden first.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up on 2 points. So the first is under 3.1.1, the bus depot strategy. And not commenting on whether minorities should buy the depots or not, but merely I think as a committee we should be very firm with the board that they need to make sure they get the costings right. We know from the experience in Birmingham City Council how estimates of cost of buying depots can be completely out of kilter with the actual costs. And if this isn't thoroughly checked as they progress through it, you can end up in a situation where there's a large black hole being created. So I do think we need to be really clear that the board need to make sure they are very firm on what the numbers will be, so they know what they're signing up to, rather than committing to something that then becomes a problem down the line. The other one was on 3.1.4, the road safety action plan, which clearly is really important for the whole region, but especially in Birmingham, where there's been a real issue with pedestrians and cyclists being victims in road accidents. One of the Birmingham City Council's been doing some work, and I know one of the things that's come up at that committee is the significant number of uninsured drivers in the region. And given this piece of work is being done jointly with the police, again, I'd urge that this action plan ought to pick up an action plan for dealing with uninsured drivers in the city, because clearly there's a lot of research that highlights that uninsured drivers are far more likely to be involved in accidents. And if we can tackle that, that can hopefully help contribute to making roads safer in the region. Thank you.
So on the depot strategy, we've already done one acquisition of a depot over in Walsall, so we've got some experience now of going through the numbers thoroughly. But this is just it's not looking at any specific depots. It's not making any sort of financial recommendations at this point. It's just adopting that strategy, and each depot that we look to acquire or site for a future depot will be subject to an individual business case. So that thoroughness will be there just to reassure you on that as well. And then just to again reassure on road safety, uninsured drivers is on the hit list as part of the action plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Fence.
Thanks, Chair. Bobby's actually just asked one of the questions that I was going to ask about the depot strategy, because I think we did, have a really fairly negative experience in Birmingham with the, the issues around the National Express bus depot. And but obviously from the previous briefings that I've had, I've understood, that having that ownership of the depots is crucial, for the franchising model to actually work, and for there to be a genuine element of competition, and the possibility to attract in different operators. So I've understood that, but in the light of the new legislation that's going to go through Parliament starting today, the Best of Buses Act, and the possibility of setting up municipal bus companies, will that have any influence on the thinking about bus depots? So that's my first question. And then on road safety, again, Councillor Alden is correct. We've had a real spate of fatalities and life-changing injuries over the summer months in Birmingham, just as we did last year. And Birmingham City Council has declared a road safety emergency. But I suppose I'm yet waiting to see evidence that we're actually treating this as an emergency. It's a bit like the situation that we've had with climate change. Birmingham and other councils have declared a climate change emergency, but then it's a question of whether the council can then act as though they are dealing with a real emergency, say in the way that we did with COVID. Because at the passenger and road safety Meg on Friday, we had a long discussion and with excellent presentation from Darren, and I and others asked questions about average speed enforcement, and as far as I understand it, we're still waiting for the business model to say that councils can understand the real costs in the amount of revenue funding that they may need to make available for the system to be viable. So I really just want to understand what's going to be in the board report about the timescales for that, because Darren said that the target for the system to go live is now April 2025. And my question is that now a realistic and deliverable deadline? Because for Birmingham, it's an absolutely key priority, and we need to review the location of the current enforcement sites, but also try and deliver on the pledge to expand the number of sites, but it's all contingent on having that viable funding model in place. So I'd like an update on that, please.
And before Anne answers, I did see press coverage on Friday to say that Solihull Council had actually were going ahead with 5 new ASE sites through some of the villages in rural Solihull, but also along the A41 Warwick Road in the Alton of House Farm area. And given what we were told, Councillor Clements, at the passenger and road safety Meg, and the business model, it's interesting to see Solihull getting on and doing something rather than citing the business model as a reason for delay. And I've asked for further information regarding that as well. But over to you, Anne.
Okay, I'll answer on the bus depot stuff first, Councillor Clements.
Thank you.
Obviously, whatever option we are in terms of operating the bus network, whether it's the municipalisation, franchise model, or commercial network supplemented by contracted services where there's no commercial market, depots are a real issue in terms of barrier to entry for competition. So the reason why we're introducing a depot strategy, with or without a potential for franchising, we have a bus market, commercial market, which is failing and requires quite a lot of extensive subsidy. Without that subsidy, we would be expected to put in contracted services where there was no commercial market, and we have fewer and fewer bus operators actually bidding for those contracts as well. And the reason being is the startup or setup costs for other bus operators as well. So I don't think, whilst we've got to go through what the legislation is proposing in the new buses bill, and what municipalisation may mean, and assess all of those risks as well. I think a strategy for owning depots would help us in our current operating model, or any potential new future operating model about how we manage the bus network as well. So that's on that one. In terms of the road safety and particularly speed enforcement, the business case work has come back and it's been reviewed by all of the local authorities, and we're making some adjustments to that and looking at what the preferred option is. And it's a combination of average speed enforcement, spot speed enforcement, mobile enforcement, working with the police. They've got more mobile units now that can be deployed across the network, as well as looking at red light jumping as well, because they are also an issue. Obviously, speeding is probably the biggest contributing factor, but there are other factors which are contributing to some of the killed and seriously statistics that we've got as well. We were requested by each of the local authorities to produce that business case, because we need to understand the revenue consequences of managing that scheme going forward. The police were also quite keen to have a regional scheme. It gives them more flexibility about how they do the back office notice and ticket processing as well, and also how we can gear up for more activation of those in terms of either offering people training where they've broken the speed limit, or for, obviously the fines as well. At the moment, as fines for speeding go straight to the Treasury, and they are not seen locally. So we are also, again, re-looking at that, working with our colleagues over at West Midlands Police and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner to see whether or not we can have a pilot where we could retain some of that funding. At the moment, though, each local authority is having to put its own revenue, because this is not a scheme which washes its own face in terms of the finances as well. And working very closely with West Midlands Police, who are offering some revenue support to cover existing operations. But if we are going to expand more camera enforcement, spot or average speed enforcement, we need to work out what the revenue solutions are to manage the contracts. Over a period of time, we are expecting that the contracts can also, that currently exist with the people who provide the hardware and the software, can morph into a single one. We get better efficiencies financially for that as well, and then continue to work with the police as to how we sort of fund the revenue. That work still needs to be done, and we've got meetings ongoing. Since Birmingham also declared its road safety emergency, working also with the Chief Constable and the Mayor of the West Midlands, we have been having regular gold meetings with the Chief Constable, with all parties, senior members of each organisation involved, to bring some of those things forward as well. And whilst we're still working through the business case, we're looking for some early wins in terms of how we can use more mobile enforcement. I think the police have just bought a further mobile unit as well, and how we can deploy those across the network more broadly, whilst they also gear up some of the back office operations around this as well. I think how Solihull have brought in the schemes, I'm not quite sure, but obviously I think Solihull Council have probably thought about how they would provide revenue funding to support those additional programmes as well. Police have separate contracts with each of the authorities, and again, they're just wanting to put those into one. So it'll be a period of transition whilst we do that as well. The other thing that we're doing is also looking at the existing sites and how useful they are. There are some sites where there's actually very low activation because there is good compliance on the road network with speed. So can we relocate those to other areas, and then using the data that we have on accidents killed seriously and speeding data, looking for where those new sites and putting a business case around each site as well, which obviously would also need to be consulted in the usual way with residents. I know that's what Solihull has done with what it's rolling out as part of that as well. And then that will then help us work on what the timetable is, Councillor Clements. But the business case as a whole, we're hoping to have that signed off by the end of March, ready to go into new arrangements with the police next financial year. But it doesn't mean to say some things can't be done with the mobile activation units whilst the new sites are prepared for. However, we're going to be carrying out speed enforcement from static cameras.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hyatt and then Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought it might be of use to share this with the committee with relation to 313 on page 32, the provision of ring and ride and land responsive transport for the region. There's an opportunity Skin has been there to say yes or no to the new target operating model, ring and ride and demand responsive services across the region from April 2025. Historically, Ring and Ride was provided by a charity. And in my passenger first Meg, anecdotal evidence was shared about how superb the quality of this provision was, how it was absolutely centred around the needs of the most vulnerable adults that use that service. However, it wasn't commercially viable, and the charities that set it up, it failed. And National Express came in, took over the service and delivered a service which they felt would be commercially viable. But we heard in my Meg that it absolutely did not meet the needs of many of the customers that would like to use that service. It didn't optimise the number of customers, and it certainly didn't meet the needs of many. This target operating model that I was privileged that officers shared with me some about what they hope to achieve through it is the chance to put that right. It's a chance to put the needs of residents absolutely at the heart of what we provide. And it might be that it's a bit more money. It might be that in order to do that, it will cost us a little bit more than it did when National Express ran it. But these are our most vulnerable residents. Their needs cannot be met in any other way. And if we need to pay a little bit more to get it right the first time, as my colleague at the end of the table said, it's something that maybe we need to think very seriously about, because with all budgets, it's about priorities and where do we choose to spend our money. And if we get the chance, I hope that we'll say to our leaders that go on board to say yes. We've got a real chance now to make sure that the needs of our most vulnerable residents are met through providing an absolutely cracking ring and ride service.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I take it that's more a comment than a question, Councillor?
It's a plea.
It's a plea. Okay.
To say yes to this.
I'm sure officers have noted that plea and will reflect that in the discussions that we send back to the board. Councillor Akhtar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Please let me correct you. Yes, Solihull may be introducing it, but in Coventry, we had a terrible tragedy on Longfellow Road. 2 young, very little children died. And then we made a manifesto pledge. And in Coventry, almost every main artery, we have average speed enforcement cameras, and the whole behavior has changed. You know, whether it's Linden Road, Anstey Road, Billy Road, Folzo Road, Stony Stanton Road, Broad Street, and many others now we are also going to complete coming year. And as I said, it has made a massive difference. And please, Anne, I agree what you said, but that needs to be taken forward and introduced in our region, regardless of the cost, because this will stop the slaughter. And this message needs to go from this committee, and I hope the colleagues will agree with me. But slightly I'm taken back because we don't, I think, Chair, we have a meeting, TDOS meeting in October, right? We have question and answer session with the Metro Mayor, but this is a crucial work and we have a very little information. Take, for instance, depots. I mean, at least we want to know which depots are our own. Say in Coventry, we own, the city council owns the depot and we lease it out to long lease to National Express, and would like to know what, and it is, they are crucial far as franchising or any other system. These depots are concerned, as you explained. But please, we need a bit more information. Also on bus network stabilization update, we are all very nervous that how our officers, and I don't doubt their ability and capacity to have a deal with the operators from January 2025. But we've got nothing here. What can we say to, our leaders regarding them? I mean, once again, we will be using this grant because we haven't got much choice to contribute towards 50 million pounds subsidy, but we need more information because that's where I'm confused also, that are we here to influence our leaders? And also, yes, we scrutinize them, but we need more information here so then we can be effective telling them what we want them to do.
Thank you. And I entirely agree. If I recall correctly, there was supposed to be a board meeting in September, and thus we would have got the papers and would have been able to see the detail. Obviously, officers can't share details of reports that aren't yet written. But first of all, obviously, there will be board papers in time for the board on the 11th of October. 10 days later, we are, as a joint scrutiny committee, meeting with the mayor, so we can question him on the detail of those reports. If, of course, we are unhappy with any of the reports presented to the board, we have the powers as a scrutiny committee to call in any decisions based on certain criteria. And again, might be a good opportunity to refresh the criteria on which we could decide as a committee to call in any reports that we're unhappy with, that we don't feel provide all that detailed information that you actually would like. And of course, the one advantage of this meeting happening before the board papers are written is to have our say to comment, which officers will reflect back, might not make any difference, but will reflect back to the officers writing the report and the board as to the views of this committee. So there's 3 positive ways forward we could actually take it, and it doesn't have to be just one of them. It could be a whole variety of one. And Lindsay has indicated that she's happy to share a briefing note on the call-in process plus criteria. I don't know if you want to add anything else.
No, obviously the papers will be published 10 days before the board as well, so you will have visibility. And I welcome Councillor Akhtar, who wants to make sure that you are appropriately briefing your leaders for those sessions as well, because that's really important to us. We make sure we get you the information so that you can do that ahead of the board as well. So we'll make sure that you've got the papers beforehand.
Thank you, because I am meeting my leader.
Councillor Singh.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, just on the back of Councillor Akhtar, I was actually at the MEG committee, passenger road safety last week, and Darren was mentioning about how the funding is, we can't meet the actual average speed cameras everywhere because of the funding. And if it's not actually you're creating the revenue in, then it's not cost effective at all. But it was mentioned last week too, it's not about how much fines that we can issue, it's about the road safety. and I was at the West Midlands open day at Tallyho, and there were a number of sector policing units that were there. I was talking to some of the traffic officers and sergeants and inspectors. They did mention about mainly boy racing, and that there's no boy racing in Coventry because the amount of cameras around the ring road, and it's actually stopped the whole of this boy racing. On Birmingham New Road, there were 2 young children that actually died. That was due to speeding. And there's only just a small section of average speed cameras near Dudley area that we have, but not coming towards Wolverhampton at all. On the Black Country route, there's only small pockets of sections that we've got average speed cameras, but not anywhere else. And yet, where there was fatalities, there's no speed cameras there at all. Speaking to a West Midlands Police inspector, that it normally costs them £1 million just for their investigation. Last week, I'm not sure exactly whether it was the Travel Safer Police said that it cost 4 million to actually investigate, to rehab, and the actual hospital treatments and so on per patient. Surely we can't put a cost to actually having average speed cameras across our region. And I would just like to actually consider that it'll stop the boy racing. Last week in my ward, there was a lot of boy racing activity, and the staff at the local pub, they couldn't get out because of the amount of antisocial behaviour. That obviously that is part of the local council, but it's also the racing around on the Black Country route that we really need to consider that too. Thank you.
And before Anne answers, I think this is just a personal opinion. There's got to be greater symmetry between Operation Hercules, I believe, which is the police operation to deal with boy racers and car cruising, and average speed enforcement cameras and road safety in general. But that's just a personal opinion.
So I totally agree with what Councillor Singer's just said. And actually, what we would want to see is no fines being processed because everybody is compliant on our roads. But we do have to consider how we fund the operation. So the capital investment in terms of a rollout of more cameras, each authority is giving consideration about how it's using its local network improvement plan money to do that. But then the revenue, which is then maintaining the system, back office functions, that do the notice processing as well. There's a cost to that has to be covered. The benefits, like you say, if we're reducing killed and seriously injured, the NHS costs of treating somebody, or the lifelong cost for somebody who's had a life-changing condition, are huge on the public purse elsewhere. So I absolutely agree with you that you cannot put a cost on helping to protect lives. We still have to have a financial solution as to how we bring it about as well. Each of the local authorities currently put an element of revenue funding in to manage that back office. The police are offering some other revenue to cover some of those costs as well. That will just maintain the status quo. So we have to make sure that we've got some revenue funding between all organisations to manage this on the network as well. And that's what the business case will explore in terms of the financial elements of that as well.
Sure.
Yes, Councillor Singh.
So thanks, Chair. Yeah, because talking to the inspector on Saturday was that if it's going to cost them £1 million, that some of that funding can get put into this this huge pot of where you can fund all these cameras and the ongoing running cost, and also with the local authorities and with the NHS England, because you'll be saving, the NHS England will also be saving if there's no fatalities or the reduced in accidents. So obviously having all these different authorities and NHS, the police, so surely that will actually cover the cost, the running cost of the cameras. Thank you.
Again, before I ask Anne to just briefly come back on that one, What I think it's been a very useful discussion on this item agenda. If you could break down the discussion from members on each of the individual reports going, the full reports going to committee on the 11th, and make it clear what members debated, discussed during this for the consideration of the board, you know, and to reflect the views of this committee. Councillor Singh, supplementary. Yeah.
The issue is getting all parties to agree to put in an element of revenue, so whether it's from the NHS as part of their preventative care, or whether it's from the police or from the local authorities themselves as well. We need to come up with what the revenue solution is between us all to make sure that we've got the cost of the whole scheme covered. And ultimately, this is about getting compliance on our roads, reducing speeding and road racing, which is a problem around certain locations as well, and making sure that we're keeping people safe.
Councillor Kittle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The one aspect of boy races that affects us in our area is that they come through the area about 12:30, between 12:30 and 3:30 in the morning, and we can hear them coming through at very high speeds. And the amount of damage now, walls, railings, traffic lights, ballards, the amount of road damage and the road to the infrastructure and the street furniture now is considerable. You can follow the route around our area where they come in the middle of the night. You can hear them coming through, because I live about 200 yards away from Ham Lane and that area and Woolscott Road. And I think we have to take into consideration now not only the damage, the danger to themselves, but the huge costs they now cause in society, repairing the structure after the damage they created. We've got to take this into consideration. And I think we need the police to concentrate on this area. I know they've scrapped a few cars and they've been looking at it for a while, but they haven't stopped it. They're still coming through, and they're coming through at these impossible hours. I know it doesn't affect this transport committee in the sense that it's beyond our normal time of work, but why races have been raised, and I raised the issue of the amount of damage they're now causing on the roads. No more.
Again, I think that's probably more a comment rather than a question, but I'll make sure that comment is also reflected in what we report back to the board. Councillor Kittle, thank you for that. And finally, Councillor Clements.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thanks, Chair. Really, I just wanted to come back to the point that Anne made in her opening remarks on this issue, which is about the retention of the fines from the cameras, and that the importance of keeping that revenue locally, because it's not about profiteering from enforcement. It is actually about having the resources to keep this scheme going. So I would really welcome a strong message going from this committee to the board about that, but also possibly representations going to DFT and Treasury about that. Because at the moment, as far as I understand it, the only element of this activity that could generate revenue is the speed awareness courses operated by the police, which I think they can keep revenue if there is any surplus revenue. But at the moment, their ability to deliver those courses is constrained by the number of personnel that they've got to deliver them. So I think that the fees retention is a really important lobbying point for us as the whole CA region, I think, because otherwise this ASE network is just not going to be financially viable, because part of the impatience that I'm expressing is that that in Birmingham our financial difficulties are well known, and this is going to be a revenue pressure. I believe it's a necessary one, but we need to have the information about how much is required so that our cabinet member and other councillors can get involved in making the case inside our own council for that allocation of revenue funding. Thank you.
Duly noted, and your last comment is obviously an internal BCC issue.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask for a discussion at this committee. If there's no other indications, I'm going to move on.
Chair.
Yes, Councillor Tar.
Chair, I noticed you keep asking Anne to raise these issues, which is right, and she will. But you are there, sir, also there. Why can't you raise these certain issues? and emphasize to them.
You will be pleased to know that I spoke quite often at the last board meeting, and I think it was commented upon by the mayor. So should I be there and I have a problem because I've been summoned for jury service by Her Majesty's Court and Tribunal Service, which clashes with the board meeting, if I am there, I will be able to make those points. But I have a legal summons of not on my own volition, but one which, as a citizen, I must fulfil.
I nominate John Nicholas.
No.
But I have asked the vice chair to go on my behalf, and she has consented. Should I not be able to make it?
Can I just say, over 7 years, Tim Huxtable is the person who's spoken up most about transport issues at every meeting I've attended. So I have full confidence in you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Covenant. Right, item 8, Member Engagement Group's Progress Report. I said I would just make one comment about action point 10 on page 11, and that Keith Bond agreed to undertake a short review of the MEG in the light of comments made at that committee with a view to bringing forward recommendations. I would ask Keith to bring forward those recommendations at the next TDOSC meeting. I believe Keith's unable to be here today, but I know that he has consulted with Councillor McNicholas, and I think there's a broad agreement in terms of going forward. Any changes will not be made until the next municipal year, because MEGs have already set out their work programmes, what they're going to want to do and achieve this municipal year, and I don't want to interfere with that. So with the committee's consent, I've asked Pete to bring that to the next TDOSC meeting. Would any MEG chair like to very briefly, because most of the MEG reports are being detailed in the papers, very briefly highlight any issues within their own MEG? Don't feel you have to, but if you want to, please indicate. Councillor Alden.
Thank you very much, and I'll try not to go into too much detail. The report sets out what was discussed at the last meeting. One of the key things I wanted to flag is we're particularly trying to focus on lessons learned and the monitoring of some of the rollout of these schemes where there's been delays before, to try and make sure that they can be sped up and delivered in a timely manner. Other thing to highlight is the areas of work. So over the coming year, we'll be looking to take lessons from elsewhere, both in the UK and overseas. Obviously studying the rail reforms and rail fare simplification and seeing impacts there and what we can do to help try and maximise those opportunities. And as I say, the challenges we highlight is particularly around the delivery of schemes and costs. So one of the things we're doing now is having each scheme on a page updates to every meeting to make sure that members know where we are with them and that everything is being tracked as best as possible. And just wanted to give every member of the committee the opportunity, if there's something you particularly want the MEG to look at in terms of schemes in your area, or we know where there's been an issue, please do feed into myself and we'll make sure the MEG looks at it in the year ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Alden. Councillor Ward.
Thank you. The report, I think, that's been submitted by Jake is quite comprehensive in the case of the air quality MEG, and you can see that we've set out our work programme for the next 12 months. But there's just a couple of things I wanted to flag up. First of all, at the meeting in July, we considered the West Midlands Local Authority Air Quality Annual Status Report. As is set out in this report today, it was good news really to see that there'd been a positive reduction in the number of sites exceeding the national average NO2 levels in the period between 2018 and 2022. The number of sites exceeding has come down from 77 in 2018 to just 26 in 2022. And then the other couple of things was, first of all, somewhat disappointingly, the Department for Food, Environment and Rural Affairs has still not come to a decision on reviewing the bus retrofit programme. I don't know if there's been any further progress since July. And then secondly, we noted at our meeting in July that change requests submitted to DFT on the zero emission buses under the Zebra programme, that change request being a move from hydrogen battery buses to battery electric buses. And I just wondered if there'd been any further update from DFT since we met in July.
Andy, you want to cover any of those points? Councillor Ward, could you turn your microphone off, please? Thanks.
For both of those, Councillor Ward, there's no further updates to what you've already received, but obviously, as and when that comes to, we'll make sure that you, as the chair, Meg, gets that information.
Thank you, Councillor Hyatt.
Just to add to the challenges and risks potentially, is that I note that no successor to the lead officer in implementing active travel schemes across the combined authority hasn't been appointed. Phil Havenhand's successor hasn't been appointed, so that is a challenge and risk which is ongoing really. Phil Havenhand is the lead officer which local authorities liaise with in the implementation of active travel schemes. He's an engineer, you know, his skills are and his pragmatic approach was obvious during the Meg, and his knowledge and skill was very evident. So I think there'll be big boots to fill, and his successor wasn't appointed, and therefore it remains a challenge and a risk, because at the moment we have the top score that you can have, that the government views us as the safest pair of hands to give money to for further active travel schemes. I think us and Manchester are the top 2 in the country, and therefore it is a very real, potentially challenging risk.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hyatt.
There is a recruitment process ongoing to replace Phil. Obviously, Phil's a contractor working with us at the moment. So we are in the process of making sure that we've got a lead person that can continue. You're right, tough boots to fill, because Phil has been great in this role.
Thank you, Councillor Rockford. You want to say anything?
Yeah, Chair, quickly, last year, I did raise that on Midland Metro, we don't have any political representation from this committee. So can Robert consider that in his MAC? Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to say anything, Councillor Kay?
I believe that the notes from my report from my Meg has been circulated now and added to the document pack. We received reports on the updates for the draft safer travel plan and the regional road safety strategy. Principal interest from the Meg was on the problems at Birmingham and also the funding of the road, the average speed cameras, and we had 8 other issues which we have raised for our proposed work plan, which we will finalise more at our next meeting in October.
Thank you very much, and can I just say thank you again to all those who act as Meg champions. Just going back to one comment from Councillor Akhtar, we have political representation on the Bus Alliance. We have political representation on the mechanism Metro is the odd one out on that one. Okay, thank you all. In which case, I'm going to move to item 9 and the work programme. Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so within your pack, you will have the forward plan for the Vivian Skateboard. So you can see forthcoming items on there. And you also have the work programme for this committee. Pleased to say that the work programme has now included with it your finance scrutiny sessions. So those have been scheduled for the year. Also, the mayoral Q&A dates, they have been confirmed and are within your plan. And also the workshop sessions to help prepare you for the Q&As, those are also scheduled within your plan.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I think, Lindsay, you wanted me to mention that at 1:30 we are reconvening here for David and his LTP presentation as well. Councillor Alden.
Thank you. I think it would be fair to say that both the mayor's and the government's sort of biggest proposals, if you like, are around changes to buses in the region. Looking at this work plan, there seems very little under these committees looking at that. And I appreciate it'll be for us to decide when during the process is going to be the most suitable time. But I know reports are going to the WMCA board, so I just think we need to make sure that we are properly tracking what those proposals are, how they develop, and influencing them along the way where it's appropriate to make sure we can get the best out of the changes.
Noted, and I entirely agree with you. Councillor Nicholas.
I'm looking at the 3rd of October. My Meg meets on that day. I'm wondering if the flash has been noted or are the times different?
Can any officer answer that question?
Is it?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, that's something that we can take away and have a look at. Outside of it.
Okay.
Councillor, different times.
Got one?
Thank you. Just wanted to give my apologies for the prep meeting for the mayoral policy questions, which is taking place on Thursday, the 3rd of October. Unfortunately, I won't be in the city on that day, so I'll have to give my apologies.
Okay, Lindsay will duly note that. As I say, subject to obviously liaising with Councillor Nicholas to make sure the that doesn't clash with his Meg. Any other comments? No, in which case, just to inform members, the date of the next meeting the date of the next meetings are Monday the 21st of October at 10 o'clock, which is the joint LMS Scrutiny Committee mayoral Q&A in terms of policy, and of TDOSC itself on Monday the 4th of November at 11 o'clock. Obviously, group meetings beforehand, and if I don't see you before any of those, hope everything goes well and see you at those meetings. Thank you all very much and see you at 1:30.
For those members online, if you are joining the LTP briefing later on, can you please rejoin on this meeting link?
Chair, can you note my apologies for the LTP briefing? I'm unable to make that.
Sorry, I'm getting one question from Councillor Clements, one councillor from Councillor Nicholas. So can I just take yours first, Councillor Clements?
It was just to ask if my apologies can be noted for the LTP briefing session at 1:30. I'm unable to join that.
They will be noted. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Are we being kicked out or can we have our lunch here?
You can have your lunch here.
Thank you very much.